I never set out to be the guy who draws a hard line and says not one step more. But the night Judith Pike marched up to my back gate with a baseball bat and a half-dozen followers, our quiet corner of Maplebriar Reserve stopped being a neighborhood and turned into a test of who actually owned my front door, and whether the dad who fixes sinks and smokes ribs on Saturdays would fold or stand tall. I wish I could tell you I had a speech ready, but my mouth was dry. My heart was punching holes in my ribs, and all I could think was, keep Riley safe. Keep Ty and Max behind me. Do what a husband and father promised to do. It didn't begin with bats. You know that it began with friendly reminders that sounded like a handshake but felt like a leash. Repaint the mailbox. Misty Pine angled the truck just so swap porch chairs that weren't on the list. And every time we complied, the bar scooted an inch like Judith with her pearls and clipboard, and Queen of the cul-de-sac Smile was teasing the fence to see where we'd break. Then the storm hit Big Tree through Lena and Hector Morales' living room. Power gone for blocks, insulin warming in a dead fridge, and we were the only house with a generator. Not because I'm a prepper, because after a winter outage I'd promised my boys warm soup if it ever happened again. So we opened the door, made coffee on the gas stove, tucked our neighbors into the guest room, and for a minute, you could feel what community is supposed to be. Enter Judith at sunset, pink sweater. 2 board members flanking her like ushers, announcing an emergency HOA meeting would be held in our living room at 7, and that my family and our guests could relocate for the evening. I laughed without humor. Said this is our home, not a community center. And when her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she said, think carefully. Bylaws authorize reasonable measures. I closed the door, felt it hit her palm, and knew she'd be back. The notes multiplied. The tow truck showed up at dawn to snatch my old pickup, like it wandered onto the property by mistake. The driver shrugging that Maplebriar had orders. And when I asked for paperwork, and he didn't have any, I told him real calm. That if his hook touched my bumper, we were all going to learn a little about trespass today. He left, but the message stuck to the morning like humidity. Online, a concerned post popped up about residents hoarding power and undermining order. No names, plenty of breadcrumbs. And I didn't reply because the internet is quicksand. The more you kick, the faster you sink. Instead, I gathered every letter, snapped photos of every sticker and stake, then carried a stack to a local lawyer named Mei Chang, who read everything, tapped the pile with a pen, and said, half of this is theater. Half is pressure. Keep records, do not escalate. And if anyone steps onto your property trying to throw weight around, you call me and the police in that order. She also handed me a printout of the state property code, like a carpenter's square for the soul. I tried the nice way petition on a clipboard door to door, plenty of nods and soft apologies, and the quiet kind of fear that tells you people have learned to live under a thumb. One older neighbor's hand shook so hard he had to steady his tea, said Cal. I can't be on the wrong side of her, and I didn't blame him. Fear is heavy. It makes good folks small. 2 nights later, I installed extra cameras, one on the side yard, that always looked like a shadow, even at noon. And when Judith gathered a crowd in her driveway the next day to sell order, I walked up holding May's printout and said the HOA can regulate paint and fences. It cannot step into a private residence without consent or a court order. If anyone enters my yard to take property, that's trespass. If anyone raises a bat or a crowbar, that's assault. A few heads nodded. Judith's mouth went thin, and Hector, bruised and stubborn with a blue tarp. For a roof stepped between us and said, back off. You're not the law, and for a blink you could feel the street remember its spine. The twist came at midnight, when the back camera pinged, and my phone filled with bobbing flashlights funneling down the alley like a slow tide. Judith at the front, pink sweater, catching a smear of light. Not a clipboard in her hand this time, but a bat. 2 board members carrying crowbars that glinted like bad ideas, and Riley squeezed my arm while I handed her the phone and said, "Call 911. Put it on speaker." I stepped onto the patio with a flashlight in my left hand, my right close to the holster I'd bought for a day. I prayed would never come, and I called out before they reached the gate. "You're trespassing, turn around," and her voice, high, bright, sure, floated back. "Maplebriar has decided your house will host tonight's emergency session. Open up." I raised the beam into her eyes. Said, "This is private property. Leave now." And she pointed the bat past me at the sliding glass door where my boys were peeking. Said, "How safe do you think they'll be if you keep defying us?" And something in my spine went from cold to iron. Last warning. Do not come closer. Then she lunged. Not a step, a decision shot. Eyes locked where my family stood, and I drew and fired once, one crack that split the night. Judith dropped in the grass with a scream. The bat clattered like a pan, and the crowd scattered flashlights, jerking like a string of pearls, snapped in midair. I set the gun on the patio table, hands out. Waited for the lights. Cuffs, protocol, my boys crying in the window. Judith shouting murder. And then the second twist, the one that saved the truth from being shouted down. Frank Delgado, quiet neighbor 2 streets over. The guy who waves once and minds his business like it's a craft. Stepped forward with a retired badge, looked at the camera feed, and spoke to the officers. With that steady cadence, only decades of real life can give. Clear warnings, visible weapon, direct movement toward the residents. One controlled shot. They watched the video, cuff keys clicked, and I sat on the steps with the thin smell of gunpowder sliding into the damp, while an ambulance ferried Judith and her story to the hospital. Morning in Maplebriar looked like a set after the actors left. Yellow tape fluttering folks walking dogs they borrowed just to pass the scene. Casseroles arriving because Midwestern guilt is a love language. Online. I was a monster to some, a patriot to others, and mostly a tired dad to myself, washing dishes with hands that wouldn't stop buzzing. May called with the path that wasn't revenge, but repair. You can't sue your way to peace, dissolve the HOA, cut off the head of the snake. And Frank showed up at my door and said, "I'll walk with you, not to scare folks, to steady them." We knocked. We listened. We showed the footage and the property code. We heard about garden windmills, fined like contraband. Halloween lights that overstayed by 2 days, a plastic slide. Threatened with a call to child services, and you could feel a change, like a room opening a window, like people remembering they were citizens, not subjects. By Friday, we had the signatures to trigger an emergency vote, and that night we packed a garage that smelled like grass seed and bike tires. Played the video with the sound on, so everyone could hear the warnings, and the bat and the one shot. Let Frank explain the law. In plain English, put May on speaker to outline how a voluntary association could replace a punitive one. And when the ballots were counted, it wasn't close. Maplebriar's HOA was done. Peace returned in a humble way. Signs down, measuring tapes, retired roofers on the Morales house, volunteering a Saturday because they'd seen enough of smallness on the news block party with too much potato salad. Frank teaching my boys to cast a line without hooking an ear. Riley laughing again in the kitchen, and still I'd wake at 2 a.m., Check the feeds. Watch raccoons turn the world sinister. For no reason sit with the knowledge that I'd crossed a line I never wanted to meet, and find a rough kind of gratitude that when it came I met it with one shot and every warning I could give. The court barred Judith from serving on any board again and handed out probation and community service lighter than my anger wanted. Right for the man I'm trying to be. I don't need her crushed. I need our fence to mean safety, not control. And the lesson that settled in my bones was simple. You don't fight petty tyranny with more tyranny. You fight it with receipts, with boundaries, with neighbors who stop whispering yes when they mean no. That's my story. And if you're still with me, tell me straight. Was I right? Was I wrong? Did the court go too easy or just enough? Have you seen power dressed up as protection in your neighborhood, or your kid's school, or your job, and did you push back? Or keep your head down, drop where you're watching from, and your local time share what happened to you? And if you want more real talk from folks who had to stand their ground the hard way, hit subscribe. The best way to keep communities honest is to keep telling the truth out loud. Together, you know what I mean.